Welcome to Friends with Fertility, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of fertility, reproductive health, and all the emotional journeys that are in between. I'm your host, Elizabeth King, a fertility expert dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, support, and inspiration you need on your path to parenthood. Whether you're just starting out, exploring your options, or looking for solidarity and advice, we are here for you. Let's embark on this journey together and turn uncertainty into empowerment and make friends with fertility. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to Friends with Fertility. Today we have Dr. Aly. Am I saying that right? Aly. I even practiced this before, you guys. And of course, I guess that's what the mind programs, right, is so strong. Cohen, welcome. Thank you for being here, Dr. Cohen.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
She is a board-certified rheumatologist and integrative medicine physician, recognized nationally for her expertise in environmental health and medical education. She is the author of Detoxify, the everyday toxins harming your immune system and how to defend against them, which connects the dots between everyday chemicals and the epidemic rise in immune disorders and autoimmune disease, and what we can all do about it. Thank goodness. She continues to teach, lecture, and practice medicine at Princeton in New Jersey. So thank you so much. There's a huge also background of information that we will put in the podcast notes as well, if anyone's curious about that. There's a lot there. She's very well educated, and I can't wait to dive into this because I feel like it's top of mind for so many people in such an impactful way, more now than ever. I feel like at first it was, okay, I'm going to buy organic food, 20 years ago. And that was kind of the big deal if you were spending money to buy something organic as far as food. And now it's really, people are paying attention to our environment and trying to detoxify things. So first of all, how did you get down this path? And then we'll dive into what can we do in the day and age that we live right now.
Oh, for sure. So to go back to the story of how, let's just put it this way. I didn't ask to be in this work. So that will tell you something right there. What happened about 16 years ago is I was a new mom. I had a 2-year-old and I think a 6-month-old and a golden retriever who was about 4.5 years old at the time. And, right out of training, and I was really getting going. And my golden retriever dog, my puppy, he was 4.5, became really sick. And of course, I thought he swallowed something. I thought, no big deal, just another thing a dog does. I'll see it come out the other end and keep moving. But it turned out he was really sick. And he was diagnosed with something called autoimmune hepatitis, which is not only an unusual diagnosis for dogs where your immune system or their immune system attacks itself at the liver. So the body doesn't know itself from foreign body. But it's very unusual in that breed. And so it really, number one, broke my heart because I'm an incredibly, long-standing animal lover and continue to be. But the other thing,
babies, right? Our 4-legged babies.
And he was my starter baby, right? So I had him before my kids. And, it was just one of those most shocking and heartbreaking moments. But I also became very concerned because I thought if this dog became ill with something so unusual and his other litter mates were not sick, because we looked into that, what could be driving this immune system dysfunction, this trigger against himself? And more so, what could be exposing him to this illness that might be also affecting or could affect our kids and myself? So, back then I was looking at his water quality and maybe there was some problem with the municipal tap. We would live in a farm in New Jersey. Maybe it was his dog food that was contaminated. Maybe it was the flea and tick collar chemicals that I would put between his shoulder blades and not even bother to wash my hands.
Sorry to interrupt you. Was it just because of your background that you even had the thought of that it's something environmental that
not at all
this, or did they tell you that it could have been from something around him?
Actually, even his vet was really perplexed. And so, to be honest with you, here I was at that time eating Cheese Whiz and Oreos. I had rolled up to McDonald's every morning to get my deluxe breakfast while I was pregnant. Like, I really was not even thinking environment. Because like for so many other people, I always thought that so much of the products that we use and all of the exposures that we're actually seeing from the marketplace have been vetted for safety. There was some process in place. And when I started to, because I was so heartbroken and so driven to figure out why this dog became so sick, I was essentially doing an environmental health survey, but I couldn't even tell you that until maybe 16 years later. I'm writing this third book now where I'm trying to get it really into the consumer market, not just the textbooks that I write. And I'm really thinking about, what do people ask themselves? What should they be asking or about their bodies and their lives and their exposures that maybe I didn't have a chance to have back then? But it was really a survey to find out what he was living in and around and what we put on him. And, fast forward, it was a journey that I didn't ask for, but I did really dive deep and work with some of the most incredible researchers. I read papers, I was learning about plastics, the red toy in his mouth, and it just kept going. And the more I learned about what animals are not protected against, right, in terms of their products, much more so, it led me into the human exposure area. And because I was trained in autoimmune diseases and I'd just been out of fellowship for rheumatology, I was starting to begin my journey of seeing what was coming through my doors, what ages, diseases that were never, at younger ages, that were, in people who had no family history. So these de novo cases of autoimmunity, young people. And it really started to come together. And here we are 16 years later. I'm putting all of that training and perspective into, something people can use.
Again, I see this in my day-to-day life, not only on the fertility side, but just with friends and family being so hypersensitive to their environment and what they're ingesting, et cetera. We just moved recently, and we went from California, where all the power lines are underground, to here where they're all giant, massive everywhere. And I'm like, how is this not a problem in some capacity? And where can I get the research of this, right? Because again, my mind is always thinking about, how does this has to be in the soil somewhere, and then the water and my kid, all the things, to the point sometimes you can go mad just
Right.
trying to like figure it all out.
Well,
And I
I was
think,
I was mad. At the beginning, I was very much on a ledge, right? I was at the highest point of concern and the least amount of understanding. And that right there will pose a major problem for people because you're overwhelmed with fear and you have no knowledge and no direction to go in. So it really was a deep dive. And to be honest with you, I've come full circle from that place and I can really give actionable evidence-based recommendations that make a difference, not only for my patients, which I've seen certainly from doing this work and trying things out and letting people understand, how to get the messaging across. But there's just, you walk through life now, or at least I do, in a very, with my glasses or looking around and seeing how to make things better. And it's really not, it's a daunting, very overwhelming topic. But I feel that if you get control and understand the why of why it's important, and you make very simple, reasonable changes at your own pace. And I really stress this is a journey for everyone. You will eventually layer in some of the most incredibly valuable changes for your life and your family.
right. So what are some of those basic ones? I think with fertility, we kind of talk about some basic ones that everybody kind of knows now, but taking that even a step further from your perspective and what you see, what would you suggest?
So, if you don't mind, I'm going to just give you a couple facts about why it matters, because to me, going right into what to do doesn't really give you the why. So, I want to make sure I just get a couple interesting
Yeah,
facts.
please. For anybody who may not know,
Right.
please educate us.
Okay, so in the US, the United States has an incredible bias towards manufacturing, in the sense that literally no ingredients in the cleaning products, personal care products, textiles, our clothing, our furniture, our industrial buildings, really, there's no required testing for safety or toxicity before those ingredients are put into products that are put onto the shelf. And that alone is enough for
How
people
is
to be,
that possible?
what? And
Yeah.
it's true because we've had decades and decades of legislative failures for this issue. all the way back from 1938, which I talk about in the book. And I really want people to understand that the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that started out with good intention in the 1930s really never developed further because there was so much of an emphasis on free market, on manufacturing, on development, on saving resources, and especially around the 1950s, when we went to World War II, was a big time period when thousands of chemicals were created for plastics, for pesticides and fighting overseas, for saving resources like wood and stainless steel. And there was just an antibiotics. And like I said, there was an incredible amount of chemistry that was being built. And, the problem was it was never set up to be tested, those chemicals, before they went into the market. So now step back a second and think, well, we're human beings. We've been really around a very, very long time, actually about 4.5 million years. And yet we've had over, and I mean this, about 350,000 chemicals, because it was estimated in 95. Now it's most recently around 350,000 synthetic chemicals that have been
Wow.
created only in the last 100 years of human existence. So when you think about evolution and what humans need, or have been around or have functioned with that environment versus where we are now, then you start to see a collision between the body trying to figure itself out. Certainly the
How is it possible that not everyone is sick?
Yeah. Well, it's getting higher and higher. If you think about the chronic conditions, not just autoimmune and immune disorders, you think of chronic metabolic conditions like
Right.
diabetes, diabetes. If you think about obesity, if you think about infertility, if you think
PCOS.
about all of the hormone regulated physiology, growth and development, bone health, I'm talking now to menopause audiences, how these chemicals affect just normal healthy physiology. And it's not just about the chemicals. I don't want people to be so overwhelmed with exposures, because we'll get into that and I'm going to give like lots of great information. But the second piece of this, which took me a long time to figure out, comes from anthropology training from many years back, is that we need certain nutritional intake to offset some of these exposure problems. And so, modern day humans, we have this exposure issue, but we also have a nutrient deficiency issue. So we're sort
Right.
of behind the eight ball when it comes to even managing, or appropriately, or even improving our management and physiology of how to get these chemicals broken down and out of our body.
And is the nutrient need different for everybody, like everybody's specific body, as well as you being in New Jersey, me being in California previously, like the different types of exposure? Or is it just across the board, everybody needs these minerals to a certain degree, period, end of story?
Yeah, so my studies took me down a rabbit hole of nutrition in humans to start with. Of course, in my practice, I test for a lot of things that, again, I use conventional labs that people can use their insurance. That's part of the book that I wrote, because I wanted people to have access to the right ICD-10 codes so that they could walk into their doctors and say, I have this insurance coverage. I'm going to go to LabCorp Quest. I want to use that. Here are the codes. Could you write me a script? So
Right.
I want people to know that's also another part of this messaging, is that I want people to be able to afford everything that I'm recommending. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
important issue. But here's the thing, human beings, anthropologically, we are not getting the vitamin D exposure that we've
Right.
gotten for millions of years. And that comes from a lot of different reasons. We don't get as much conversion through our skin as we'd like to think, even when we get tan. So we have a problem from skin going through kidney, going through liver, and then ending up as a blood level of vitamin D, which hopefully people are getting at least once a year, a vitamin D3 level, basically. And that's something that's just a modern day human experience. We also don't have a lot of nutrition in our food, especially the food system of modern day. So we have that problem. Vitamin D gets blocked by some medications when it comes to absorption in the gut, which is 26 feet of bowel. And we wear a lot of sunscreen because we don't want to get skin cancer, which is totally reasonable, right? So we have all these reasons: staying indoors, cold weather, our lifestyle is not outside.
Right.
And so we do have that mineral, I should say vitamin. It's actually a hormone, believe it or not, but it's a
Yeah.
it's a vitamin deficiency. Then we have things like iodine.
Which, to interrupt you real quick, for our specific audience, vitamin D is always something that you must get checked before you're getting pregnant while you're trying. That's the number one, number two, thyroid and vitamin D are really key.
Yeah, and thyroid is so fantastic, and especially for your audience, because people don't think about iodine as one of the most
Right.
important nutrients that we're not getting. And
Hmm.
just to give you a little snippet about the history of iodine, iodine is cheap as rocks. I mean, it's not expensive, but we don't make it as human beings. So we have to get it from either our food, or we need to get it from breast milk. If you're an infant and you're trying to help a baby have normal IQ and in brain development, you need actually a degree of iodine crossing the breast tissue into, during breast milk, or even formula if you're not breastfeeding. So the idea is that iodine is something that is overlooked, but it sits in the thyroid gland actually and protects it from a lot of environmental chemicals that we experience that want to stick tighter. So the more you are protected with the iodine, a very reasonable amount every day, I say 150 micrograms. And I talk about that in a good multivitamin, which I think is necessary for everyone, prenatals included. But these are fixes because the iodine is working to help us against our modern day exposures. So again, this nutrient deficiency that's fixed plus removal of as much stuff we can in a reasonable way, that's how we're going to kind of move through life a little bit healthier if we can. Of course, genetics play a role, but we're talking about things we can absolutely control.
Do you see most, speaking of genetics, do you see most people with autoimmune that it is genetic, and or is it just you have it and it's triggered by something environmentally? Because I'm one of four girls, and I think three of the four of us, including my mom, have thyroid, and so it's always like, oh well, it's genetic and you just have thyroid disease, and I'm like, I don't really buy that personally. I
Yeah.
know that there's probably, but I tend to think that there's something that we are doing or not doing that has caused that to happen. I'm sure our genetic makeup doesn't help, but yeah. So as the medical expert, what do you think about that? Like,
Yeah. So the whether we develop any disease is really this kind of dance between our genetics, our genetic makeup, our lifestyle, and our exposures. And, that includes, for a lifestyle, do you smoke? Do you drink alcohol? Do you exercise? Do you sleep reasonable quality and quantity? Do you manage your stress? Did you have childhood trauma that contributes to risk for actually developing immune and autoimmune disorders? So there's a lot of things that have been really studied in a reasonable way, not just in animal studies where you can control confounders and all these different inputs, but really in human studies. So we know that autoimmune disease, in and of themselves, where your body attacks itself, so MS, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid lupus, the list kind of goes on to about 170 autoimmune diseases, they are rising in terms of incidence, in terms of new cases around the world. It's now 7 to 14% of the US population, it's really about 30 million people. And it's not, to your point, it's actually been shown to not be connected to, say, first degree relatives of your parents all the time. In fact, I have, as I mentioned, one of the drives for this book was to really shout on mountaintops that I'm seeing this with so many de novo new cases with younger people than you would even expect this disease or that disease to happen, but really with no family history that they can recall having that same disorder. So, we do know that genetics tee up the risk, right? But whether or not your lifestyle and your exposures allow those epigenomic proteins which sit on our genes. We can't shuffle our gene sequence, but we can affect the proteins that sit on our genes and either allow diseases to be expressed or not. That's called your epigenome. Okay. And so we have control over our epigenome by things such as exercise, diet, nutrition, stress management. But
right,
even nutrition, a lot of this is about what do we need to give the human body that it hasn't really been seeing, and also removing the stuff that kind of pisses off the immune system because the body's never seen these chemicals in millions of years, so it's
right,
responding as it should. Unfortunately, we're a mixture of these chemicals. We want to start peeling them away in a reasonable way.
right. Speaking of, my sister recently is a cancer survivor and has had some issues because of the heavy duty chemo and radiation that she had, 30 years ago, but that's presenting. And on top of that, had a breast issue, implant breast issue. And for 7 years, and the doctors could not figure out, and she got them removed, and lo and behold, within, I think, a month or 8 weeks, her body completely healed. And it was amazing because all of these doctors had said it's an autoimmune, it's an autoimmune. Well, yeah, your body was attacking itself because of this foreign object inside, right? And it was just amazing to see how the body auto corrected after it was removed. Now, granted, she still has the RA and other things, but that in and of itself was just like amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you think about the immune system, as I've had to dig in deep for training and for all these years, you start to realize that the human body is not only fantastic, it's physiologically remarkable, and that there's many ways to harness the best parts of human physiology to kind of help us through this muck, right?
Right.
When I think about foreign bodies, and look, I color my hair, people can see that. My kids play lots of lacrosse. I'm a lacrosse mom, so we're on toxic, kind of turf, and believe it or not, I've done podcasts on The Smart Human is my podcast, and I have some of the most incredible researchers in these areas of environmental health. One of it was one episode was on turf, which is close to my heart, and I thought it was very balanced. But the
I need
idea
to listen because that's like top of mind these days for my three little boys too.
Oh, please check it out. I mean, it's very reasonable. So I've been on these fields forever, and my son's actually a Division 3 lacrosse guy. So I'm like really invested in this. But it was his dream and my other your son's dream to be part of that. And so it's a matter of how do you manage in a world we've created. So they had to
Right.
wash their legs off every time they came home with soap and water because those are petroleum based tire crumb exposures. There's PFAS chemicals that are making them very slick on the blades of grass. There's paint, there's antimicrobials. There's a lot of stuff that we don't want in our kids, but our kids want to play on those fields. So
Right.
it's just a matter of what are the rules are you creating, not letting the kids play with open wounds, thinking about the temperatures and how hot the chemicals, aerate off and thinking about
Right.
when and how they use the turf. So there's lots of hints on that in the book and also in my second book, even in the podcast. But the point I wanted to make is that our, we all live in the real world. Okay. And, everything I talk about, all my tongue in cheek commentary and stories are coming from a place where I didn't know a thing about a thing on this topic. And I may stay wanting to color my hair, which I clearly have. I may want to, go to more lacrosse games. I want people to think about how do you incorporate high yield stuff, which we'll get into, drinking water quality and why that's so important, food quality, and all these big inputs. How do you look at those things first? Because they're like the greatest things to tweak before running into the minutia. I even created what's called the 4 A's of environmental health navigation, which applies to this conversation. A is assess. So you want to know where you're starting from. I have a 50 question survey that's very reasonable, not shaming, not, trying to put people, make them feel bad, but you want to see where you're starting from. So that's assess. The second A of the 4 A's is avoid or swap. So do we really need 25 kitchen cleaners, doorknob cleaner, sink cleaner, window cleaner? Do we need as much as we're buying or bringing into our home? And then also, if we want to keep the stuff we like, where are the resources to either vet those, to buy them, or even do it yourself recipes for making simple surface cleaners and those kind of things? Very reasonable ingredients that our grandparents used. And then the third A is that add component. So what can we add to the human body to make it work better from a nutritional perspective, from fiber that binds a lot of these chemicals to clean water, because that's what cleans us out, to stress management, to which nutrients have actually been shown to decrease some of the epigenetic changes that we see even in the lab. So the idea is that add piece is so valuable and so doable. And then the fourth A is allow. It's life. It's birthday cake with purple icing. It's travel. It's those plastic water bottles we had to grab because we had no other choices. I think if you have the allow, it takes the pressure off all of the other things that we might accomplish.
Yes, just hearing you say that, it feels heavy, right? It feels like, wow, how can we protect our children and us, right? But at this point in life, we're more concerned about them than us. But I do feel that it ramped up so quickly from the time you and I were growing up to
Mhm.
now with children these days of like just so much. But now I guess we do have alternatives, thank goodness, that are there.
There's
And
lots. I mean, in 16 years of doing this work, this research, the textbooks, I mean, I haven't even gotten out as much as I have to the communities because I've been sort of putting this into textbooks with research. Now I'm really shouting on mountaintops because, for instance, water filters are so reasonably cost, they're everything has come down. There's more makeup choices, there are more cleaning product brands.
oh,
There's
yeah.
awareness. There's, mattress toppers. My kid just went off to college, and boy, that was a fun lift trying to figure out what is this kid going to do? Because he doesn't listen to me ever, but what is he going to do that's the least amount of effort to keep this kid healthy? And I had
I'm
a
sure it's absorbed into him throughout all these years, even though he think he's not listening. I'm sure he is.
but I posted on this. I actually did a post where we were saying goodbye to him. And I said, this is the stuff that I put into place for this kid's dorm room. And it was just so basic and reasonable. But like, you don't think about it until you kind of need to think about it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, that's not a big deal. Of course, a
Right.
fan, they want a fan. All the kids want a fan. Why don't you get a fan with a filter in it? Because they exist and they're not expensive. So it was just a matter of keeping an open mind and trying to do the best you can as a parent, and we'll see what happens.
I also love that you mentioned that we have the ability to shift this, right? It's the epigenetics that we can control this from our environment. It is not a life sentence just because your parents or grandparents may have had something. In
Yeah.
most cases, it's now doesn't go much beyond that because we didn't have all these toxins for that next generation. But I think it's really good to know that we have the ability to make the changes now so that that doesn't get triggered. It doesn't show up for those that are coming. And so, like you said, use those 4 A's to make the assessment in your own life. And it trickles down, right? It's you, and you are the example, just like I was saying for you. I know my kids will say, oh, that has red dye in it and you shouldn't have that, or is there chemicals in that? And maybe it was a scare tactic at some point for me to have them avoid certain things, but it's worked. And they know, certain things have chemicals and we want to stay away from them, and certain things are okay. And as they get older, they'll understand more accurately, but I think we do the best we can.
We do the best we can. We should be applauded for any effort we make. I don't think anyone should feel defeated from this topic. But I just lectured to my kids' upper school, auditorium, 9th through 12th grade. They didn't love that, but I think their friends did, but it was fun. Anyway, here's the take home messages that apply to 8th graders and apply to physicians that I'm working with, right? We're sponges. Our bodies are sponges. We didn't know these chemicals were around. We didn't know that they were unleashed and sort of really, let out of the stall. Horse left the stable, but they're around us, and we can measure them in blood. We can measure them in urine. We can measure them in breast milk. We know that when we make changes, and I apply that to many of the references and stories in the book, when we apply organic foods and buy frozen organics, which are far more accessible, filled with nutrition, believe it or not, compared to fresh organic foods. Organic is actually the only food oversight regulation that we have available in the US. We have the FDA for medications, and we have USDA organic regulations, which means no genetically modified ingredients are allowed. The soil had to be cleaned before those produce was grown. If it's packaged goods, no genetically modified, no colors, no preservatives, no additives. There's no pesticides on produce, or very few. It's not a perfect system. No fertilizer chemicals. So the USDA organic system, which took 20 years to put into place, really 10, and then started 10 to get going in the 80s and really late 80s and 90s, is the only thing we really have in terms of having a system that cleans food before it gets to our supermarket and has requirements. But you can still wash produce with baking soda and white vinegar if you don't have access to frozen foods. So those options, I have put everything out there for anyone in any situation as best I could. But we can work through these things and see how these levels in our bodies change. I don't even recommend people getting blood tested because we're all loaded with these chemicals, right?
I was
I
just going to ask that. What is the best way to measure your change, so to speak?
Yeah. And so I talk about a few cases in the book where I did measure because they had specific issues, right? That I called out because of their specific behaviors or their specific occupation and maybe higher exposure. But in general, my mantra is why test your body for chemicals, which some break down faster, some break down slower? That's called the half life. But independently, at any given moment of any given day, you're going to have a different makeup of those exposures for a variety of reasons. Testing is not necessarily going to help you make decisions. It might even scare you. What you really want to do is take that money, because a lot of times, although I put the codes for the basic chemicals to test from insurance-based labs, so people have that, but the outside labs that tend to be a little pricier, I would rather people take that money and put it into buying a great water filter, whether it's carbon block or reverse osmosis, which I really think people should think about because they're so aggressive in cleaning water that, in fact, the best you can get. But the idea is, let's take that money and buy, frozen organics on a regular basis, or get a massage, or get therapy for, managing childhood trauma or stress levels, or get a babysitter or travel. There's just so much better use of money than to test your body in general, and even to test your home or even test your water, because to me, you're going to find things. You're better off just
Right.
trying to pay into the solution.
And speaking of that solution, in your book or where we can find you, does that show what you would recommend on those types of things?
Yeah.
Because there
So
is
here's,
so much out there in the market, right?
yeah.
That's overwhelming too.
Okay, so here's how I've done what I do. So, for instance, let me just tell you that the book has a 21-day plan in it that's
Okay.
built around those 4 A's. So, it's very simple. And if you were to just start going with the 21-day plan, you would know exactly what you need to do day one, day two, day three. Very reasonable, very easy, and not a problem. I also talk about supplements that I think are very necessary. I call them human fertilizer on top of a healthy diet, which is variable. I feel that these are the ones that are protective and healthy for our immune system and our brain, and a lot of different things. So just want to get that in there. But here's the thing. I teach high school, I teach college, I teach 4 physician training programs on environmental health. I don't share brands. I do not endorse products. I'm like, no one, I just know what I want to do, and I know I want to teach, and I want to make sure that what I'm saying is not tainted by any secondhand message of purchases. That
Sure.
being said, I give people as much as I could possibly give you in terms of how to choose what you need to choose between the vetted resources online like ewg.org, Yuka, Clearia, Think Dirty, all these great free apps, but also how to choose water filters. And what are the distinctions of what you would choose? It's very much laid out in an easy way in the book in terms of the chapter on water. So I really want people to have the fishing rod as opposed to the fish, so that no matter what the manufacturers do, whether they change formulations of their shampoo or they change this, you know what to look for. And once you get that going, you just keep moving. So that's
Amazing.
just kind of a disclosure there.
Okay. So pick up the book, Detoxify. Where else can they find you and follow you and learn from you?
Thank you for asking. So I'd love people to follow The Smart Human. The Smart Human was started maybe 10 years ago when I was so frustrated. I wanted everyone who followed to be the smart human. It's not about me. That's on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. The Smart Human YouTube channel is really good. But also the podcast. If you're interested in these topics, I have one on tattoos, which is very, very balanced and really interesting. I have one on turf. I have one on integrative cardiology and integrative pediatrics. So just a variety of health and environmental health topics, great researchers, breast health. So that is really my baby, is the smart human, social media and podcasts. And I even have courses, the Smart Human Academy, on thesmarthuman.com. You get the theme here. If people are interested in having an appointment, I actually really love my practice and I love seeing patients. I'm not giving that up anytime soon. So I'm in Princeton, New Jersey. I see patients for everything you can think of, certainly even for just consultations and thinking about how to move things forward in a healthy way. But if people want to do telemedicine, I'm also doing that as a consultation online, so you don't have to be in Princeton. So yeah,
Amazing.
that's it. That's at alycohenmd.com.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cohen, for being here. And I feel like there's so much more to dig into. So I really encourage everybody to start doing that and follow those 4 A's, grab the book, learn from all the social media that's out there with her and
This is
do
it.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
do
you so
better
much.
because we know better now.
Yeah. When you know better, you do better. I'm telling you, thank you for having me on and sharing me with your audience. And, I hope maybe we'll work together in the future. I'd love to. So we can, keep sharing good information.
I would love that too. Until we meet again, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Friends with Fertility. We hope that you found the stories, insights, and tips as inspiring and informative as we did. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Your friends with fertility are here for you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and more fertility resources. Until next time, stay hopeful and keep believing in your journey, and know that we are sending you lots of love.